Hello, and welcome to BattleTech Faction Briefings. Today, we are discussing a mercenary faction that has one of the oddest unit symbols I've ever seen. They were born out of two different squads. They charge less if they get to fight Capellans. They stupidly joined the Ward of Blake. They are Smithson's Chinese Bandits. Smithson's Chinese Bandits have an odd symbol, described as three circles coming together with a set of stars in the middle. It is probably a mix of the emblems from the two founding units. The unit insignia is painted on the upper left leg and right shoulder of the bandit mechs. Smithson's Chinese Bandits have two different color schemes based on the era. Their early color scheme is charcoal and magenta. Then in the 31st century, they switched to green with gold stripes for their paint style. There is no noted reason for the change. It could be a book error, or perhaps their commander wanted a more showy color scheme than the old one. Like many mercenaries, Smithson's Chinese Bandits serve in some key battles. To skip spoilers, go to the time listed. The origins of the Chinese Bandits began shortly before the beginning of the Succession Wars. They began as two different mercenary teams. The Jade Warriors were stationed on Aza, and Dawson's River Raiders were stationed on Aldebaran. Both units would get angry due to their lack of proper payment from the Capellan Confederation. The CCAF would accuse them of dereliction of duty when they refused to sortie after being paid. This misunderstanding was due to the mercenary liaison officer that was embezzling funds meant for both mercenary squads. Both mercenary teams would flee the Confederation rather than deal with reprisals or empty promises. The two mercenary teams would end up arriving on Galatea only a few days apart. Not long after that, they would join forces to get revenge on the liaison officer who had ruined their reputations. In order to determine who would be in charge of this new unit, Dawson and Smithson played a game of dice. Alan Smithson won the game, and the unit would get the new name of Smithson's Chinese Bandits. They would search for work and quickly found it with the Free Worlds League, who had been dealing with Confederation attacks. Interestingly, the Bandits would have a special clause in their contract that stated they would be paid more for non-Capellan-based targets. This was done so they would be pitted against the CCAF more often in order to get their revenge. They would fight the Capellans and assist in taking the world of Carbonis from the Confederation. They would be stationed as the guards of the world as the war drew to an end. Despite the heavy fighting in the war, Smithson's Chinese Bandits would be at 82% effective strength. This would be much higher than most mercenaries of the time, as many units took heavy damage or were outright destroyed during the war. The interwar period would be good to the Chinese Bandits, as they would be a reinforced regiment at 143% effective strength and would be ready for anything the Second Succession War sent their way. They would remain on the border and do raids into Capellan territory as they continued to hold Carbonis as their base. This time around, they would take much more damage, as they would be down to 68% effective, losing over half of their forces during the course of the war. After the war came to an end, they would change their contract to the Lyran Commonwealth in order to rebuild with a higher paying employer. In 2926, Smithson's Chinese Bandits would be a two-regiment force, with a full regiment of arrow fighters as backup. The lack of fighting and good pay helped them become one of the stronger mercenary teams of the early Third Succession War. Due to their newly built-up strength, Captain General Samuel Merrick would want to bring the Chinese Bandits back into League employ. This would be due to the FWL's need for veteran-level units to assist in protecting their borders. Over the years, the Bandits would take a beating while fighting against the Capellans along the border. By the early 31st century, they would be back down to a single regiment. However, their reputation was so good that Janos Merrick promised them a bonus if they would fight on the Loyalist side during the Merrick Civil War. The commander of the Chinese Bandits would play both sides against each other in order to get the biggest contract possible, and eventually chose to fight for Janos Merrick. The first mission was on Mathuron. Smithson's Chinese bandits would be sent in to save the 11th Atrean Dragoons, who had been taking heavy damage from the 12th Atrean Dragoons. The bandits would land behind the 12th and deal heavy damage. The 12th would hold out as the Chinese bandits gave chase. A month later, 2 regiments of the Wolf's Dragoons, Beta and Gamma, along with the Kerensky Company, would arrive to support the rebel faction. Realizing the odds were not in their favor, the bandits would begin an evacuation. The 11th would keep fighting, and the bandits would provide long-range fire support. But it wasn't long before the 11th had to surrender, and the bandits headed off to recover on Carbonis. In late 3014, they would raid Fuentes. They would deal heavy damage to both the weakened 5th Regulan Hussars and the green 7th Ducal Guards. They would have destroyed both units, except the Wolf's Dragoons would come to the rescue once again, with Epsilon Regiment driving off the bandits. However, in April 3015, Smithson's Chinese bandits would return to Fuentes, and their attack was enough to get the 5th Regulan and 7th Ducal Guards to surrender. After the Civil War, the bandits would change employers to House Davian. They'd be sent out to hit Necromo. They would face off with Wayne's Wreckers, a battalion from McCarran's armored cavalry. The enemy battalion would work with local armor and infantry, who would assist in tracking the bandits. This allowed the wreckers to set traps, with the bandits running into dug-in forces or having their path cut off by ambushes. Later, they would attempt to flank what they thought was the main force, but fall into yet another trap. This led to a retreat without hitting any of their objectives. However, the reconnaissance they provided would ensure the battle was not a total failure. They would continue the contract with several raids into Capellan territory. The most notable of these raids was on Cyan in 3022. They would not deal much damage, but felt good about striking directly at the capital of the Capellan Confederation. Not long after that, they would return to the Free Worlds League and get stationed on Zazma due to its proximity to Terra. This would place them in a position to work as defense and raid Lyran territory if requested. The bandits would begin the war on Zazma as a means of defending the border from Lyran attacks. However, they would head out to fight as Operation Dagger, a series of raids on the Lyran border, began. Smithson's Chinese bandits would be sent to attack Milton. They would capture the world due to the border guards being distracted by the sheer amount of attacks across the border. In 3029, the FWLM would pull their forces off of the captured worlds and less important League border worlds. This was due to the perceived threat of the Tikhonov Free Republic. The Chinese bandits would be part of the team on that border, but the invasion was a ruse to keep the Free Worlds League from interfering with the Lyran side of the war. This allowed the Lyran Commonwealth to retake their worlds and capture a few extra before the war came to a close. When the war finally ended, Smithson's Chinese bandits would be sent out to help deal with border defense during the Andurian secession. Their first mission was on Connacht in 3030. This was followed by a garrison on Sophie's World in 3031. The final defensive mission was on Furud in 3032. None of these stations provided any challenge for the veteran mercenaries. Finally, they would go to Shiro 3 in 3036. It is not noted that they were involved in the fighting, so it is likely they were only there as garrison forces after the FWLM team continued their march towards Andurian. When Andurian was finally pacified, Smithson's Chinese bandits would be moved back to the Capellan border to continue their normal work of raids and defense. During this time, they would continue to build up with enemy salvage and the money they earned for their work. The force building would be successful, as they would become a 2-regiment team before the arrival of the clans. The 1st Regiment would be stationed on Kirkbakken, and the 2nd Regiment would be on Asuncion. These positions kept them away from the warpath of the clans. This would allow them to continue to get stronger as new tensions built up in the Inner Sphere after the Battle of Tukian. Smithson's Chinese bandits would be sent to capture Woodstock and Nanking during Operation Guerrero in 3057. The battle for Woodstock would not go smoothly, as the 2nd Bandits were nearly wiped out by the Woodstock Reserve Militia. Meanwhile, the 1st Bandits would lose 2/3 of their forces to the Nanking Militia. After accepting this defeat, the 1st would go to Woodstock in order to save their brothers, but would lose another company to the local forces, and get pinned down in an industrial complex in December of 57. The Crater Cobras were sent in as backup, but would have their dropship explode due to sabotage from their previous mission. Only one regiment was able to land, the Black Cobras. The remains of the mercenary force could do little to turn the tides in the battle. Smithson's Chinese bandits would barely escape on their 4 dropships, with only 3 companies of troops and 1,000 tons of mech scrap. Their missions were a total failure, and both worlds would remain in Fedcom hands. Upon returning to the Free Worlds League, the Chinese bandits would get in an argument with Thomas Merrick. The Captain General would refuse to assist in replacing their lost equipment, as it wasn't part of the contract, but he would pay the mercenaries with over 300 tons of upgrade kits and some XL engines. While the equipment is helpful for improving mechs, it can't glue the scrap back together, nor can it pay for the cost of replacing the necessary parts or usable mechs that they could upgrade. The bandits would not renew their contract and go to Outreach in order to rebuild. They would finance their efforts by selling one of their Overlord-class dropships to the Wolf's Dragoons. This got them 2 companies worth of advanced tech battle mechs, a company of Inner-Sphere Omni-mechs, and a good amount of C-bills. Nearly 100 soldiers had to be let go due to the lack of usable mechs and aircraft. Those soldiers were given some upgrade kits as an apology in hopes that it would help encourage other units to hire the dispossessed bandits. By 3059, they would be up to 2 battalions, 2 fighter lances, and an elite company of infantry. However, they were not sure if the infantry should be trained in using battle armor, or if it would be better to sell the battle suits for more money. The Chinese bandits were better off than what they were after Operation Guerrero, but they were a shadow of what they once were. The next contract Smithson's Chinese bandits would take put them on the side of the Allies during the Fedcom Civil War. They would be sent to Small World and would work well with the local forces, who also supported Victor Steiner Davian. In April 66, the 17th Arcturan Guards would arrive. They were surprised to find heavy defenses on the world. The bandits would rally the local forces, then attack the 17th not long after they landed. The 17th would take some damage, and the battle would change into a fight for the world rather than a simple raid. The team led by the bandits would use hit-and-run tactics to wear down their enemies. Things would shift when the Achernar Sarna March Militia arrived in June. Not long after that, Allied reinforcements would arrive in the form of the 5th Syrtis Fusiliers. The Loyalist forces would get hit hard, but pull off a counterattack that would nearly break the Allied forces. During the fight, the commander of the Bandits would get captured, and the majority of their unit would be destroyed. They would use the cover of a storm and the wreckage of their forces to fake their death, so that the remains of the Bandits could join up with the rest of the Allied forces. It was the arrival of Wilson's Hussars that helped the Allies keep hold of Small World. The Loyalists had to pull back, but the Allied commander, Major General Koenig, would attempt a combat drop with his forces to destroy his fleeing enemies. It would work, and the Allied forces would surround the Loyalists and cause them to surrender. Despite the victory, by the end of the fighting, the Chinese bandits would be worn down to a reinforced company. They would have no choice but to return to Outreach. They would attempt to rebuild, but it was difficult. The only silver lining was that the remaining fragment of their forces all possessed fully equipped advanced mechs. It wasn't long after they arrived that the bandits would take up a contract with the Word of Blake, due to promises of new equipment and assistance with rebuilding. The Word of Blake War would open with a major bombardment of Outreach. Smithson's Chinese bandits would work with the 51st Dark Panzerjägers, Tiger Sharks, and Waco Rangers as the first wave of the assault. The bandits would attack the spaceport and the Home Guard base with their skilled use of aerofighters. Then they would join up with the Waco Rangers in the push to capture the capital city of Harlech. During the heavy fighting, Smithson's Chinese bandits would get completely wiped out by the Dragoon counterattack. A very pathetic end for a once powerful mercenary force. It is not uncommon to hear about a mercenary unit being atop the world in May and gone by December. It seems odd with Smithson's Chinese Bandits, however, as they have a downward path despite how strong they were pre-3057. It almost feels like the lore is bullying them. Many mercenary forces have become punching bags during various wars, and the Bandits are just another casualty on that very long list. Due to their long history, there are many different pilots who stand out amongst Smithson's Chinese Bandits. Alan Smithson, the last commander of the Jade Warriors, who fled Capellan territory due to issues that came up when they were not being properly paid for their work. He would join up with another mercenary team to create Smithson's Chinese Bandits. The name of the unit was agreed upon after a dice game. Alan would be the first commander of this new unit and lead them in the early Succession Wars. Erin Viola. She was the commander in the late Third Succession War. She was known for her stubbornness in battle and being very opinionated. This includes a hatred of LAMs and other hybrid mechs. She would continue the tradition of fighting the Capellans and would see the regiment only get stronger. Difficult to get along with, but respected for her tenacity. Ada Gubser. She would take command in the 3050s and is responsible for the downfall of the Bandits. She was not well respected, and after the battle on Small World, the troops wanted her XO to take command. She would take up a contract with the Word of Blake and attack Outreach in late 3067. This would lead to the annihilation of Smithson's Chinese Bandits. Antony Lavoisier. He would take command after the majority of the unit was destroyed and the commander was captured in 3066. He would use a snowstorm and battlefield wreckage to escape enemy pursuit and join back up with the Allied forces. The Bandits would survive the Battle of Small World due to this, and he would be promoted to Major, as well as become the XO of the unit once Colonel Ada Gubser was liberated. The troops would want him to take command of the unit, but he refused, feeling that he wasn't ready for that responsibility yet. He would die on Outreach alongside the rest of the unit. Joelle Williams. She joined the unit in 3010 and would raise to the rank of captain. She was a skilled scout who had a knack for finding traps and minefields. She would continue with the unit into her 60s. She piloted a Stinger named Jade Warrior after the unit it originally served with. Jody Okigama. She was a mech warrior during the late Third Succession War. She was known for her back-walking maneuver, where she would move backwards while firing on the enemy. It was a skill that earned her 11 kills and got her out of many difficult situations. She pilots a Wasp named Dauber 3. Wendell Puritan II. He would defect from the Lyran Commonwealth after the Fourth Succession War. This was due to his unit wanting to scrap his family's mech. He had difficulty finding replacement parts and would end up customizing his unit with a large laser in place of a PPC, and using the extra space for more armor. He pilots a modified Scorpion. Lisa Gompers. A lance commander in the mid-31st century, she served with the 2nd Regiment and earned her command rank due to her skill. She was known for using her LRMs to clear a path, then charge in and fight enemies up close. She pilots a Crusader. Like many mercenaries, Smithson's Chinese Bandits use what they can find. They are a medium-weight unit and remain that way for centuries. They were contracted to the Free Worlds League for most of their history, thus they have many FWL mechs that they bought or were gifted. However, they took plenty of Capellan salvage over the years. Later, they would get new mechs from the Wolf's Dragoons on Outreach, which gives them some advanced equipment in the 3060s. Both regiments of Smithson's Chinese Bandits have different specialties. The first are skilled at jungle and forest combat, with infantry and light armor as their primary urban combat team. The second is skilled in desert and low oxygen fighting, but their 3rd battalion is skilled in urban combat. Both units use the basic tactic of heavies move forward as lighter units flank the enemy. Finally, their aero fighters are trained to get air superiority first, then provide support with ground attacks. The Bandits usually have a heavy battalion with 2 light battalions as their primary formation. They are generally a medium-weight unit and prefer the versatility that weight provides them. They tend to use heavy fighters, standard infantry, and light armor. They also had 4 Overlord-class dropships, but sold one of them after their failure in 3057. They do not have their own jump ship, thus they only pull raids when they can borrow one. They prove that even if you have good tech and training, bad leadership will doom even the best unit. Smithson's Chinese bandits are referenced in some fiction, but have no point of view stories that I could find. They are also in all standard mercenary-based sourcebooks, as well as a single TRO entry. It is fun to note that they are in Liao-based sourcebooks due to the many raids they pulled on the Capellan Confederation. Also, bear in mind that some of the books only have TO&E or location data. The problem with mercenaries is that if they are not loved by the Faza or Catalyst staff, they are primarily used as punching bags. It gets worse when the bias against mercenaries becomes so obvious that many are just wiped out or forgotten about entirely. Smithson's Chinese Bandits are another one of those units that just got thrown away despite having a long, and until 3057, interesting history. Part of me wonders if they were kneecapped and later finished off just because of their name. Either way, I hope you enjoyed learning about this unlucky mercenary team. Painting up a set is a tough call. I like the green with gold striped design, and if you like fighting Capellans, then they could be fun, yet they have that loser energy due to their treatment in the 3060s, and why waste time painting up a set of losers? So if you like them, then I guess that's fine. If not, I doubt you'll ever miss not having them in your roster. If you did paint up a set, let me know in the comments. Next time, I will be covering the Free Worlds League and discussing the Silver Hawk Irregulars. Unfortunately, next year I will be shifting from a 2 video a month to 1 video a month format due to real life stuff. But if I do have time, I will try to get a mercenary video out next month as well. Thank you for your understanding, and thank you for watching. I hope you have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. May your weapons stay hot and your reactors stay cool. There are a few videos that tie into Smithson's Chinese Bandits, and 61 total BattleTech faction briefings. Playlist link is in the description. Until next time, thank you for watching, and I'll see you at the tavern.